I hate to throw cold water on all of the Trumpites out there, but you're noticing what I'm calling the great reneging here on election promises as things that people would like to see are somewhat trimmed down in the name of expediency or tremendous pressures that are going on in Washington. Welcome back to Steel on Steel. John Lufter here with you. So far, I've avoided editorializing on having a good Thanksgiving dinner and making eructitious sounds on the air. Here's where we're going right now, and you can see this in how Google and YouTube and Facebook are all becoming the new gatekeepers. Remember, there's a retrenching now of the global media. The problem is the alternative media as they view it. So that's what has to be gotten under control. And that's the way we're headed. Now, also in government and in healthcare, notice that Mr. Trump is now saying, instead of saying repeal Obamacare, he's saying, well, maybe we can keep parts of it, blah, 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 blah. So watch how this thing plays out. Where we are headed is into an area whereby the future will be controlled by these faceless, unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats who do their jobs just to keep their jobs. But the system coerces you to doing things. It's a coercive system by rewards and punishments, not necessarily jail time or stuff like that. It could even just be civil rewards or punishments. But when you try to get your rights back, it's very hard to grab onto. So that's what we're talking about here today, is the whole issue of technocracy. And it was the spring-off point was the turnover of the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, which happened back in September, ICANN, which is now looking for a home. And it will probably roost in the United Nations. You know immediately where it's going to go as far as censorship is concerned at that point. All right, let's talk about the technocrats now. You're going to talk about what these goals are. Ultimate control, so that means they need all sorts of feedback loops to tell them whether you and I are complying or not.
The Internet of Things, as it fleshes out, has the ability to track virtually everything on the planet in real time, because all they have to do is put up sensors. In fact, these sensors already exist in many places, but as the number of devices increase that have chips, it will provide a tracking mechanism where every single thing on Earth, as it moves, will be tracked in real time. This leads us into a form of digital slavery, very real. Will force people to modify their behavior if they want to get around whatever it is the policymakers are trying to force down their throat. It'll start to change people, it'll change their behavior, change their, their MO, if you will, as they move around the community. But this kind of information is not just an invasion of privacy. That is just so 1990s at this point. Being able to track everything means that they can control everything as well if they choose to.
Yeah, you can also crunch all of this with algorithms. You don't even need to know what's being said, say, for example, in these conversations.
You don't. No, artificial intelligence will take care of that quite nicely.
Right.
But it's not just talking to a central computer. It's an Internet of Things the devices are going to talk to each other directly without necessarily going to Big Brother to get instructions. And a good example of that in the utility district is if your thermostats are all hooked up to the utility company, and there's chips inside the thermostats that will allow control from the outside, then that utility company can simply set up an algorithm where it measures the load in the area. And if a condition pops up that requires, via software, of course, that requires some action given to the thermostats in that district, well, that'll just happen. It just is set in software. And so if X happens, then Y happens automatically down the road. These two devices are communicating with each other, passing data back and forth. And when they hit a threshold, boom, something happens. No humans needed. This is what they're doing in China right now. It's incredible.
But they're also, these algorithms are limited too. And we see this happening on Facebook where people are having things censored that really shouldn't be censored. Now, what if in this case it's making decisions who to arrest or something like that?
Well, of course, that's the great risk in this, because these technocrats think that their science is so bulletproof. They just don't make any provision for errors and for misuse. They think it's just bulletproof and it's always going to work. Well, that's nonsense. We know it doesn't. And innocent people will be sent to jail. Other people will be manipulated in ways that they don't deserve. And this is just a slap in the face of freedom, obviously. It's a great danger to the world right now, this idea of scientific dictatorship, where the data can control people. I used to be in the computer business, as you might remember. It used to be that people control data. Somebody had to push a button. If you wanted to do an Excel spreadsheet, your fingers had to type in the numbers. So humans pushed the data. They controlled the data. But now that's flip-flopped. Now the data is being used to move humans. There's a risk there, because what if the data is wrong? What if the data is flawed?
Yeah, no, I agree with that, because I've already said I'm right now I'm actually listening to the biography of Reinhard Heydrich, who was the number 2 in the SS under Heinrich Himmler in Hitler's Germany. And it's a fascinating life story. Remember, he was the one who was the architect of the final solution. What's interesting is it always strikes me, they were so good right from the start, right in 1932, 33, they were setting up this SS apparatus to go after their enemies. And they did a wonderful job of it, using that marvelous ingenuity that Germans always have. But I always imagine what would have happened if the Germans then had had the technology of today. There wouldn't be any Jews alive anywhere at that point.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, it's also interesting that when technocracy got started here in the U.S. in 1932 at Columbia University, it immediately jumped the pond into Nazi Germany, or the developing Nazi Germany. And they started a parallel organization. As far as I could ever tell, there wasn't any direct ties where they shared leadership or anything, but the German iteration of Technocracy, Inc. published a magazine, and by and large, they just translated and reprinted the articles that appeared in the American magazine of Technocracy. And those scientists and engineers that bought into this ideology of a new economic system, those are the people that moved into Hitler's power structure to enable him to do almost all the things he did that required technology to do it. The computer, statistical analysis and scheduling, and even engineering and scientific work and stuff. These were the technocrats that did that. Hitler shut them down early on in the game because Hitler realized that they were potentially an opposing political system, and that was not going to be acceptable to Hitler because he didn't take any competition whatsoever. But they lived on. And even though the organization was shut down, that ideology lived on and supported Hitler all through those years. I look at these technocrats, if you will, just like ICANN. They didn't care where they served. The only thing that mattered is that they did serve, that they were allowed to apply their scientific method to a complex societal problem. And, they were happy to do that. And the outcome be what it is, so well, that's the way life goes. This technocrat mindset is dangerous. It's very apolitical. They're dedicated to the scientific method. And if science says a certain solution is necessary, by golly, that's the solution you're going to get. And you better like it because science says do it.
Yeah, no, it's actually a religion. It actually has a religious base to it that substitutes science for God or for anything like that. And they follow it like a religion. And remember that the old logical fallacy of reification is making something human that really isn't. That's what they're doing. There's science as if it were a living, breathing entity, but it really isn't.
Well, it is. And it would be important to note that the father of scientism is also the father of technocracy. That was Henri de Saint-Simon. He died in 1825, but he was the guy that really started promoting this idea that science should run society. And he said in one of his papers back then, I use this quote all the time, this is a direct quote from his writings. He said, "A scientist, my dear friends, is a man who foresees. It is because science provides the means to predict that it is useful, and scientists are superior to all other men." Close quote. It's just astounding observation.
And Einstein said that is a very humble comment.
Oh, my. It's like, okay. Well, you see, religion, especially, I won't say religion in general, but the Bible says that Bible prophecy is the ability where God tells things that are going to happen in the future to show that he is God. What St. Simon said here was that scientist is able to predict, he's able to foresee the future, and therefore tell us and steer us towards the future with their quote-unquote superior science. This is the same mindset that we saw all the way through technocracy, and it's the same mindset we see today. And these are the kind of people that are going to get a hold of ICANN and have this vast store of data at their fingertips to do who knows what.
Anything else on your horizon?
Well, I will say, as far as the election is concerned, a lot of people are rejoicing now that Trump has been elected. And I would say this helped me before the election as well, by the way. Don't get caught up in the cult of personality, but rather look at the policies that are going to be implemented. Is focus on the policies, not on the person. What we're facing today for the next year, maybe 2 years, is whether or not the American people are going to take the opportunity to rise up and push back in their local communities against all these things that have been forced down on us for the last 20, 30, 40 years. I don't know how this is going to come out, but the opposition is not going to go away. They're there. They hate the situation right now. They're going to do everything they can, I think, to undermine the policies that our president will try and put into effect. And that's where the American people come in. It's going to be up to us. If we fail to support those policies and make sure that they don't get sabotaged, we will be much more successful in the long run. But if we fail it, we're in big trouble again, because we'll fritter away on the couch, watching the game shows or whatever, while the enemy continues to work to undermine everything that we have going right now. So there's still a lot of risk, I think, out there in front of us. The outcome will be determined on how the American people get off their keisters and start working to affect change in their own local communities. We really better do it. And I think we have a golden opportunity at this point to have the wind at our back for a change, not a hurricane in our face. Anyway, that's kind of my post-election thoughts at this point.
Okay, Pat Wood, got a boogie clock slammed me to the wall again. Your website, technocracy.news. The book, Technocracy Rising, the Trojan Horse of Global Transformation. We're at steelonsteel.com. I'm John Lefter. The program is Steel on Steel. I'm going to go on the record